Hi, I'm Caden, here with my brother,
Cal,
and you're watching Eating W's.
eat the W.
That's a W. Let's eat one. Let's eat one. That's a W.
On this episode of Eating W's, we have our NFL Week 17 recap. But before we jump into some of those games, we're going to talk about just one quick news update. Vikings right tackle Brian O'Neill, all-pro left tackle, has been put on IR, so he will be missing next week and at least 3 weeks of the playoffs now. So he wouldn't be back till the Super Bowl if we were lucky enough to make it, which is a huge bummer and much less likely to happen now that we won't have him till the Super Bowl. But crazier things have happened. I don't know. You got to keep hope, I guess. But in some much sadder news, the Bills and Bengals game, which was played last night, we're recording this on Tuesday night, it was Monday Night Football, has been postponed, and there's been no news updates on whether they're going to reschedule it or play it or anything like that, due to Bills safety Deshaun Hamill going into cardiac arrest on the field during the game.
Yeah, it was a pretty scary situation. He had kind of had an awkward tackle and got up and then immediately fainted after getting up. There's been no real updates besides just that he's on a ventilator and he's breathing at 50% oxygen, which I'm not exactly sure what that means medically, but it doesn't sound good. It's a pretty scary situation.
Definitely. Yep, he is currently in the ICU. So thoughts go out to Deshaun Hamill, hope for the best situations for him, and then just a bummer to see all around. But hopefully you get the best outcome for him and his family. So now we are going to jump into the other games from NFL Week 17, starting with one of the Sunday games of the Miami Dolphins heading to New England to take on the Patriots, and the Patriots barely pick up a win by the score of 23-21.
Yeah, this was another game where the Patriots defense stepped up and had a return touchdown, an interception return for a touchdown. It was their fifth straight game, which ties an NFL record set by the 2003 Patriots, I believe, who also had 5 interception return touchdowns. So really it's the Patriots defense that's keeping them alive, and it keeps them in control of their own destiny. And all the Patriots have to do is win next week against the Bills, and they're in the playoffs.
Something about those Belichick defenses. They know how to get it done. But yes, Kyle Duggar had a huge pick six to really turn the tides of this game, because before that happened, this game was very well controlled by the Miami Dolphins. They were ahead the entire time. Teddy Bridgewater was playing well as a backup until he actually ended up going down with an injury on the Kyle Duggar pick six. So that was another section of that play, which made it a huge game tide turning play for the New England Patriots. But overall, this was actually a really fun game to watch. And as Callan mentioned, it really shook up that AFC playoff picture, because it looked like the Dolphins were in control of their own fate. But now they're kind of up in limbo, and the Patriots are now the one who are in a win and in situation next week. But they got a tough matchup, so we'll see if they can finish it out. Next up, we have the upset of the week with the New Orleans Saints heading to Philadelphia to take on the Gardner Minshew-led Philadelphia Eagles. And the Saints pick up a road win by the score of 20-10 on the back of a huge, again, pick six by Marshawn Lattimore this time. The Eagles had the ball down by 3 and were starting way in their own end zone. I think they started at like their own 10 or something like that. But they had the chance to go down, take the lead, and win this game and secure themselves as the number 1 seed. But the tides again turned quickly with a pick six, and the Saints ended up picking up a win, which just barely keeps them in playoff contention, but really shakes up the top of that NFC playoff picture more than anything.
Yeah, the Eagles left the door open for not only the Cowboys, but the 49ers and even possibly the Vikings to take that number 1 seed. And one thing about the Eagles is they still have a dominant defensive line. They lead the NFL with 68 sacks, which is the most over the last 30 years. And they've had 5 straight games where they've had 5 or more sacks, which is just an incredible record and just shows the dominance of that defensive line. But just also shows that sometimes you need a little bit more than defense to win some of these games in the NFL. You got to have some offensive firepower.
Damn, that's crazy. I did not know that. That is a lot of sacks for one season. Next up, we had a divisional matchup in the NFC South with the Carolina Panthers heading to Tampa Bay to take on the Buccaneers. And the Buccaneers pick up a win by a score of 30-24 and clinch the NFC South. They have now booked their tickets to the playoffs as that 4 seed. And I want to say the Panthers, again, kind of same situation as the Saints, are just still barely in playoff contention, but I'm not positive on that. But as I mentioned, the Bucs got it now. And their real tide-turning driving player in this one was not a defensive player. This time is a wide receiver in Mike Evans, who had exactly at 200 yards, or scratch that, he went just over 200 yards and had 3 touchdowns, with all of them being 30-plus yards, which is just insane.
Yeah, it was a really good game for Mike Evans. He showed up in the fantasy Super Bowl week, so anyone who had him mostly won their games.
Well.
And then this was the first game where the Buccaneers were down by 14 points and came back to win it for the first time this year, which is very odd for a Brady-led team who usually has comebacks throughout the season. And this was his first one for the season, and it was a big one at a big time.
Yeah, the Panthers didn't play bad by any means. As I said, they put up 24 points against a stellar Buccaneers defense, but the Panthers defense this time was the one who was not able to hold up, which is pretty inverse of how it's been for Carolina most of the season. But just one quick look back, mad respect for the Panthers even being at a situation where they almost won their division, considering within this season, they both lost their all-star running back to a trade and fired their head coach in the middle of the season. So good on them to even be close to the playoffs, because they should have been like fighting for the first overall pick more than anything.
They tried to concede on the season, and the Buccaneers just wouldn't let them do it.
Exactly. The Buccaneers made sure that the Panthers stayed in it. But moving on, this time we got a NFC versus AFC matchup, with the 49ers heading to Las Vegas to take on the Raiders and picking up a nail-biting win by the score of 37-34 with a quarterback matchup of Brock Purdy versus Jarrett Stidham.
Yeah, and this was the matchup that everyone thought was going to be the big quarterback matchup for Week 17. The Brock Purdy versus Jarrett Stidham matchup. And if you looked at the score, you'd think that it was the original starting quarterback starting with Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr. But this ended up being a shootout between two late round draft picks instead.
It's hilarious that this was the game of the week. If you watch this game, it was awesome. The Raiders got out to a huge lead, and then the Niners started to kind of close it and ended up going into overtime, and the Raiders got the ball first, but the Niners were able to stop them. The big player in this one really was Christian McCaffrey. He made a bunch of huge plays from start to finish. That guy is just an absolute beast, and it's kind of ironic that we were just talking about him leaving the Panthers and now being the game changer for the 49ers. But really, in my opinion, the true MVP of this game, even though he didn't pick up the win, was Devontae Adams. That guy didn't have a overall crazy game stat-wise, but he was just always there making plays. He had a 60-yard touchdown right before overtime. He had one of the most insane catches I've ever seen. I don't know. He literally caught the ball like through the corner's arm. I don't even know how to describe it, but you'll have to go look it up.
While diving also.
It was absolutely awesome and kept the Raiders in the game and made it so that the Raiders could force overtime. But in the end, the better team did end up winning. So that's usually what happens. Now moving to a matchup where the better team didn't end up winning, we have the Minnesota Vikings going to Green Bay to take on the Packers. And the Packers absolutely shit-stomping the Vikings by a score of 41-17. And I'm just going to let Callan go first so I can collect my thoughts before I have to talk about this performance.
Overall, this was probably Green Bay's best played game, which I feel like I'm saying that every week, that each past game is their best played game, and they're just getting hot at the right time, right at the right time. So it's very good for Green Bay. They had best overall game because they had a kickoff return touchdown and an interception return touchdown. You give Aaron Rodgers a special teams and a defensive touchdown, he's going to win most of those games 10 times out of 10. I bet you that.
Yeah, this was a rough one by the Vikings, to say the least. We put up 17 points total, but if you want to look at non-garbage time, we only put up 3 points, and that was when we blocked a punt and got the ball on the Green Bay 1. We had first and goal on the 1, and we only put up 3 points. And then that was pretty much the only 3 points that we put up for the entire real part of the game. We had 3 total red zone turnovers, 2 interceptions and a strip sack fumble. It was just an awful, awful game, and that's pretty much all there is to say about it. I'm not going to rail on the Packers. They did play a good game, but the Vikings beat themselves much more than the Packers beat the Vikings, to say the least. But it definitely makes me nervous. I'm not going to act like it doesn't make me nervous, but I'm not too scared because this just happens sometimes. Sometimes players don't come out. They're not ready. You hate to see it in a big game like this in a divisional matchup because it kind of makes you think, how are they going to be mentally when the Vikings have to go out into a playoff game or a road playoff game and face a team like probably the 49ers is what it's going to turn out to be, if anybody, if we even make it through the first round at this point. But also kind of just looking at silver linings, or maybe just having a little too much hope in my soul. Maybe we just need to get this one more garbage game out of our system, and then now we're going to put together a string of really good games and make some sort of miraculous run in the playoffs. So who knows? Who knows? The NFL is crazy. For. Exactly.
That's what I'm hoping for Green Bay. So
I'm probably over hoping, but who knows? We'll see.
Yeah, Captain Kirk tied a career high in turnovers with 4 total turnovers, 3 interceptions, and a fumble.
It was a tough game, and all of those interceptions weren't on him. And the fumble, he got like automatic pressure, but nevertheless, 4 turnovers is 4 turnovers, no matter how much it was your fault.
That'll be the killer.
And then finally, we're going to end with the Sunday night football game, which actually might have been the game of the week, even over the 49ers-Raiders one. But the Steelers headed to Baltimore to take on the Ravens and picked up a road upset win by a score of 16-13 on a last-second touchdown from Kenny Pickett to Najee Harris in a beautiful last-second touchdown, to say the least. Kenny Pickett rolled out of the pocket. He was stumbling downfield. It looked like, if anything, he was going to fall and it was going to count as a sack. And then he just rifled in a laser to Najee Harris on a wheel route. It was an awesome play. You got to go look it up if you haven't seen it. But the Steelers made a lot of highlight reel plays this game because earlier in the game, George Pickens made an insane catch to get a first down. He was literally horizontal in the air and reached out and snagged the ball out of the air. So the Steeler team is actually alive in the playoffs, which is really weird to say considering their start. Now they're sitting at 8-8 with a lot of divisional wins racked up. So it would be crazy if they made it. It's kind of the same situation as the Saints, as I was talking about earlier, where it is slim chances. They would need a win and a lot of things to fall their way to be able to make the playoffs. But getting a huge divisional win right here in Baltimore keeps them alive.
Yeah, and at 8-8, they just barely do stay alive, and they need the Bills to beat the Patriots and the Jets to beat the Dolphins, and then the Steelers to obviously also win. And if all those things happen, and the Steelers sneak in as that 7th seed,
that'd be crazy because I think they just did that last year, didn't they?
They did.
They barely snuck in on a miracle in the 7th seed last year as well. So we'll see if history can repeat itself and they can do it twice. Another thing this really shakes up is that AFC North division as a whole, because now, assuming that the NFL is just going to count that Bills-Bengals game as a scratch, as a no contest, neither team gets a win, neither team gets a loss. This Ravens loss actually clinches the AFC North for the Bengals. So an extra little addition there, because now even if the Ravens win next week, the Bengals would have one less loss than the Ravens, therefore winning the division. So Steelers helping themselves out and the Bengals out in one fell swoop. Yeah. So that was our NFL Week 17 predictions. Thank you all so much for watching, and keep an eye out tomorrow for NFL Week 18 predictions. But until then, don't forget
to eat the W.